The year is 1943 on the Eastern Front. It is total war. German soldiers are being outgunned and outmanned by the Soviets. Their bolt-action Kar 98 is reliable, but it is slow compared to what's in front of them, the SVT-40. The German high command is desperate for a miracle weapon. The result was the Gewehr 43. It's a rifle that was literally stolen from the Soviets and built by forced labor. But did the Germans actually succeed at making the semi-auto battle rifle? Stick around to find out. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dennis at the Range. Today we're going to be looking at the G43. This was Germany's answer to the American M1 Garand and the Soviet SVT-40. I started this channel to share the stories behind the guns I love and learn as much as I can along the way. I'm just getting started and I have a lot of big plans for the future. So if you want to follow the journey, make sure to subscribe and come along for the ride. I also have an Instagram at Dennis at the Range, and without further ado, let's get into the rifle's history. Where did the need of having a semi-auto rifle come from? Common sense. The Americans already had the Garand fielded for their army, and that is by far the best semi-auto of the war. But that was not the main reason. It was in the Eastern Front where this rifle was needed. The Germans were already outnumbered, but they were also being outgunned by the Soviet SVT-40. So they got to work and designed the G41, which had many issues. Germans don't like to over-engineer anything. They insisted that they did not have to make a hole in the barrel because drilling a gas port would make it very unreliable. It would cause premature wear, accuracy issues, and it would be very hard to service. So they added a thing in front of the muzzle to recuperate gas and cycle the 41. This was stupid and unreliable. Walther engineers looked at captured Soviet SVT-40s, saw the simple gas piston that it had, and just said, "It's nice." Kind of like that, yeah, you know. As a result of this, the G43 is based off of the 41 in many ways. Most parts of the G43 are interchangeable with the 41. The G43 entered production in 1943.
Obviously, right?
Silly me.
In the beginning, it was called the G43, and then because it was 2 inches shorter than the Kar 98, they ended up calling the K43. I'm calling it the G43 because I don't care. Germany was losing the war, so the gun was designed for mass production. You'll see a lot of rough features when we dive deep into the gun, like right here. It was meant to be a standard issue rifle, but Germany could never produce enough of them. I just can't get enough. Only about 400,000 were made compared to the 14 million Mausers that the Germans made. Every G43 also came with a scope rail built into the side. The Germans hoped to give every soldier an optic for better fighting. The early rifles were actually quite nice, but as they got down the road, they had to make some sacrifices and some of the forged parts were not actually finished. If it didn't need to be functional, then they did not bother at all with finishing the parts. Some of these were also made with forced labors from you know where, so there's a lot of examples that were sabotaged. They were messing up the gas system, so they were either drilling a very big gas hole or actually not putting anyone at all, because then they would weld the thing shut and no one would notice. The G45 improved upon the Soviet short-stroke gas piston design to create a more efficient cycling mechanism. When the gun worked, it would absolutely mow down the Soviet waves. But we have to assume that it worked. The gun had many issues, and that's the reason why it was not as common as the Kar 98. Even after the war, nobody apart from the Brazilians briefly copied this design. The main issue is that this gun would completely destroy itself when you're shooting. It did that because it was engineered for the Eastern Front. It was very cold, so the gun needed to be reliable. The easiest way of doing that is to overgas it. At least it would cycle, but the parts were not designed to last, so it would just break. We'll go into that later. Since it was a total war of annihilation, the soldiers would die long before the rifle stopped working, so it was not really an issue. There were also issues with the material and the way it was designed. This is not a great rifle overall, but it was better in terms of firepower compared to what they had. The Germans were losing the war and needed to get this rifle out the door very quickly. Let's dive deeper into the gun now. Here we have the G43. So I got the two versions. I got the one that has a scope on it and the one that doesn't. So before we really dive in the rifle, I want to talk about the scope. Remember when I mentioned that there was an optics rail because in an ideal world they wanted every infantryman to have an optic? This one has one. This is the ZF4 scope. This particular one is a replica, so it's not the real one, but since it's a replica, it basically is the same. So this ZF4 was a 4X scope that was designed to be a universal optic that could be used on the G43, the STG44, and even the FG42. It is a 4 times magnification, which is fixed. It's kind of like the ACOG. It has an objective diameter of 20 millimeter and it has a T-post reticle, which is kind of like the bar that you see on top with those two on the sides. The mount that we see right here is a quick detach clamping mount that allowed the soldier to slide the scope on and off in seconds. To take this out, you just need to grab this lever over here and flip it to the other side. And you pull it back like so. Now, while this scope looked impressive, there was a lot of practical drawbacks. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. Since the scope sat quite far back and the field of view was relatively narrow, it was kind of difficult to track targets at close range. It was also kind of fragile. So this optic was a simplified optic compared to the high-end size or the hand-sold scopes that were used earlier in the war, so it was also prone to fog. Like the previous gen's car, the G43 had a lot of recoil, and this meant that the vibration often caused the scope mount to lose zero. So it was a super violent recoil, and it would really change the zero of the gun. And while there were a lot of drawbacks, it was an overall positive experience for the soldiers that had these. 10 rounds plus a 4x scope meant that you would mow down the Soviet waves that were coming. If we go from tip to butt, we see that the front sight is a standard hood protected front sight, and the back sight is a tangent rear sight, so nothing special about this. It does go to about 1200 meters that you push this and slide. And while these sights were adjustable, yeah, they were actually really inferior to what the Americans had in their M1 Garand, because first of all, there was less distance between the front sight and the rear sight. And since it wasn't an aperture sight, it was a regular sight, it was overall less precise. If we go lower down, we can see that there's a magazine. This is a 10 round magazine, and the rest were just stripper clips. So this gun you can charge via stripper clips. And the good thing about this magazine, it kind of rocks like an AK, is that when you pull the bolt back, there's a bolt hold open. This is where you would put the stripper clip and just put two and push them down. There's space over here to put your thumb. And the Germans actually experimented with, I think, a 15 and a 20 round magazine. So it was a lot better, honestly, than the 5 round internal magazine that what the car had. In the beginning, soldiers were issued 1 magazine on the gun, and then there were 2 more that they carried in a pouch. This is an original pouch, so there used to be 2 on the pouch and 1 on the gun. Then, as the war went on, you were very lucky to only have 1 magazine. They got really rare. The magazine release is a small paddle here in the back. The gas system is over here. It would push over here the bolt back, which would then cycle the weapon. Since it was very overgassed, it would just slam itself in the back of the receiver, and here it would start cracking. Now that we're talking from the back of the receiver, we have the safety, which is just like a flag safety. This is fire, and if you flip it to the other side, this is safe. So this is only a semi-auto version. Now let's look at the triggers. The gun is safe, pulling, and it breaks. And the reset, slowly. Okay, so quite a good reset. It's not too bad, but yeah, the trigger is not very well finished. And since this was made for the Eastern Front, they made the trigger guard very big so that gloves could fit and the soldiers could use it with those. Okay, now we have 2 kind of different versions from this rifle, because as I mentioned, throughout the war, the Germans really needed to field these to their soldiers. This one was kind of like one of the earlier models, and there are some differences, like in the front of the barrel over here. The barrel of this one is threaded, so there's a small button that you push and you twist this. This one, there's not. If we look to the other side, this one is the one that has the optic. So there's a small slit over here for the optic to stay on that this one doesn't have. And to recognize these, we can see it by the finishing of the parts. This one looks a lot less well finished. Since this one was made towards the end of the war, the finishing is less good than this one. The Germans didn't really care. If it wasn't going to be functional, the Germans were not going to take their chances to just finish parts and waste time and energy on this. There's also a hole in the charging handle, which this one doesn't have. Towards the end of the war, the Germans used to put this, which is Bakelite, which was like the earlier version of plastic. So there was plastic beginning to be used in the end of the war. This one has the serial number that starts with BCD, and this one starts with DUV. The DUV stands for Berlin Lübecker Maschinenfabrik, so BLM. They were one of the primary manufacturers of this gun. Now, in late 1944, early 1945, this factory switched their code from DUV to GVE, but this one still has the DUV. The BCD-coded G43s are actually highly sought after because they were produced in significantly fewer numbers than the other G43s that had the AC made by Walther or the DUV, which were made by BLM. BCD rifles were famously assembled at the Buchenwald concentration camp using forced labor. Because of this, production was often sabotaged, making surviving examples very interesting to historians. The main differences of these rifles were that this one was better made, the machining overall, as I mentioned, was better. To disassemble, you put the gun on safe, put an empty mag, and pull on the charging handle. So now your bolt is gonna be locked back. Once the bolt is locked back, you're gonna pull a little bit more and press on this button right here. Now this is a grenade. The spring over here is very powerful and it's only being held by this small pin. So you gotta be really careful when you're taking this out to not press this, because parts will go flying absolutely everywhere. And then you just press this button over here in the back. And now you have the whole bolt assembly. If I were to touch this, I'm not even gonna touch it. If I press this button, parts are gonna go flying absolutely everywhere. But you can see over here the mechanism. Here is the hammer. If I put this on fire, I hold the hammer here, you can see the hammer. So now I'm going to disassemble. I'm gonna hold this very tight because I don't want it to fall everywhere. I'm gonna press this button, and now slowly the whole thing comes off. Here we have our recoil spring, which is housed over here. So this is actually a stamped, it's very cheap. This used to crack because the bolt used to slam so hard in the back, it just broke. This little thing slides over right here. This is the dust cover. To take this out, I'm gonna push this in the front, pull it back like that. So here's your top cover. Then you have those little ears over here that are being pushed by your firing pin right here. So if you pull back your firing pin here, you're gonna have the little ears that are going to come off. So there was a problem with this rifle that sometimes you would only have maybe one ear that was engaged. So when you were firing, it was only being held by one. So it was actually kind of dangerous and sometimes it would explode. To disassemble a little bit more, you pull this pin back over here, which is a retain pin. This is the thing that where the hammer strikes. And then you have the firing pin, which looks like a nail. Soldiers would actually carry one of these as a spare all the time because they used to break sometimes, I think. Here is the full bolt disassembled of the G43. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to leave your thoughts down below if you've had any experience with this. Quick reminder to follow me on Instagram @DennisAtTheRange, and until the next one, Dennis out.